Welcome to Teachers Transition Podcast, a show dedicated to supporting teachers transition in, through, and out of education. Grab your seat and let's talk about how to make your next transition a successful one. Happy Sunday, everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Teachers Transition, a podcast where we're helping teachers transition in education, transitioning through, whether it's becoming a director, supervisor, superintendent, or transitioning out, whether it's retirement or transitioning to another career. And I have a dynamic, one of Texas' most revered, respected voices in education and leadership, none other than Kathy. And for those who know who she is, you need to look her up. She is a educator. She is a director of everything. There's an old show called Cheers, and people used to refer to Cliff Clavin as the person that knew everything about nothing. She really knows everything about everything and on an expert level. And she's just a person I grew to love and revere. She helped me even become the teacher I am right now in Texas. And I want to say Dr. Kathy Kuddes, but it's director, leader, Kathy Kuddes.
Thank you so much, Alex. That's high praise from you, but and I think you've overstated my case just a smidge.
I'm sure my colleagues are listening would say otherwise. You know, you're very humble, but it's for those you don't know. I've had the privilege and pleasure of working with Kathy for the last 5 years as a music educator, and she has just helped me reshape my understanding of teaching. I spent 15 years in New York, and I thought I was at the top of, I came to Texas and went through the 3 years of SMU Kodály training, and it kind of reinvigorated and helped me to reshape my understanding of teaching and my approach. And I use that even through teaching lessons and just teaching choirs. So, I want to give you your flowers while you can hear it and smell it. And I know some of my colleagues would say the same thing. You are a treasure. You are a jewel. And that's understated because we really, really appreciate the impact you've made to our world. But enough is enough. I don't want to get myself in trouble, but,
well, thank you for all that.
Thank you, of course. And you've had such a rich and diverse career in music education. Can you take us back to the beginning and what inspired you to pursue teaching?
Sure. I knew pretty early in my life that music was where my people were. And I think that's true for a lot of kids in school, that whether it's in the arts or in sports or perhaps in some, I don't understand it, but math or science, there are kids that really get turned on by that. I knew that the music people were my people. They spoke my language. That was the place I felt the most safe and secure and successful. And so the idea of studying music at the collegiate level was a pretty natural thing for me. My father lost his mind thinking I was going to be a musician. And how in the world would I be able to make a living doing such? Yes. So I declared a music education major right away, sort of to, appease his concerns that at least I would have a credential that implied at least that perhaps there was some gainful employment at the end of it. And then I think that during my undergraduate work, it became obvious that that was the right choice for me because I really enjoyed the performance aspects, the ensemble work, all of that sort of thing. I was not so crazy about the many isolated hours in the practice room.
Yes.
That is required for solo performance. And so it was, I think, the initial, yes, I'll do music ed was a bit of a, okay, Daddy, I'll do that. And then really getting into what all a performance life would have entailed, it was pretty clear that that wasn't what I was cut out for.
Yes.
I really haven't looked back. It was absolutely the right choice for me.
Awesome. I was just sharing with some of my fifth grade students that, music, we were studying about some composers from Music Memory UIL, and we were talking about, some of the composers going to conservatory and just the competition. One of my former teachers was from Juilliard, just the level you had to be. And for those
Mhm.
of you who don't know, 3, 7, 8 hours a day was kind of the norm on top of your regular class,
Absolutely.
to be a performer. And also, there's no necessary guarantee you'll get a job, and also benefits. And like every parent, is that are they going to have a sustainable job? So music education, I tell my students, I have the best of both worlds. I
Mhm.
teach and also I get to perform. So I definitely, the music ed people is my tribe.
Absolutely. Mine too. Mine too.
So for those of you who don't know, I'm talking to a master, a trained Kodály specialist. And can you share that philosophy and how it's so impactful? I mean, I can talk about this all day, but I want to hear it from the one that trained me and the one that brought this dynamic program to SMU for teachers.
Sure. Well, it's a huge question, so I will try to be succinct for the purposes of this discussion. For those of you for whom the name is unfamiliar, Zoltán Kodály was a Hungarian composer, musician, philosopher, educator, and his lifespan was he was born in the last couple of decades of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, where Hungary was a subservient power to the Austrian crown. He survived 2 world wars and deep into the Soviet period in Hungary, died in 67. So, unfortunately, did not see the wall come down in the late 80s. And so, in 1920s, he began to have some interest in what was happening in the public schools. He was a college professor at that point in time at the conservatory in
Yes.
Budapest, and was concerned with some of the skills or lack thereof of some of his collegiate students. So he started asking some questions and investigating the kind of music education that was happening in the schools below his level.
Yes.
And he pulled together a group of like-minded music educators who were willing to do some experimentation with pedagogy. And his approach uses simple, traditional folk songs as a vehicle for teaching children the language of music, how to read
Yes.
and write and hear, most importantly, to train the ear, so that all of these spots on the page and things have a context, and then using those skills to open the doors to ever increasingly more diverse and more challenging music. Ultimately, he wanted them to deeply understand what he called the great art music of the world. That
Yes.
was really his ultimate goal, rather than it just being an earworm that sort of washes over you at the symphony, that you would really understand what the composer was trying to do with those musical examples and have some hooks and some context for your ear to hang on to. And it revolutionized how music was taught in Hungary, and then caught the attention of the international community in the 1950s toward the end of his life, and has now become an international approach.
Yeah, and I will say, that's just only a snippet of what Kathy could tell you about this, and just the impact. As I said before, for me, it's kind of reshaped thinking. And we're going to talk about the SMU training, but I will say, just off the top of my head, as many teachers, it was the hardest 3 years of my life, but the most rewarding because I came out a changed teacher. It's funny. I was just talking to one of my colleagues who's a social worker, and we were talking about the challenge of teachers burning out and, how do you avoid that? And he talked about how that he was in one building and then he transitioned out to another building, and it kind of revitalized his
Mhm,
approach in teaching. And to me, moving from New York, and I was in one building for 16 years that I was going to retire, and then
mhm.
coming into Texas and being under, working for Plano and SMU, kind of put a whole second gear, which revitalized my teaching approach. And I want to, thank you and all your efforts and all your colleagues. I mean, shout out to Lindsay and all the Hungarian colleagues that, man, we'll talk about that later, but I had to shout that out because it was such an impactful learning experience in the 6 weeks over 3 years of my life. So or so.
Well, thank
So
you. And I really, your story is not unique. We have a lot of teachers who have been in the profession for some time and come to the training course and find a new lease on their teaching
yes,
and find, that it just stimulates some new thinking. We certainly welcome and encourage young teachers who are just
yes,
starting their profession because no undergraduate music ed program is focused enough on
yes,
all the things that a teacher needs, especially moving into an elementary music setting. There's just not enough time in the course in the degree plan for
yes,
all of the things that they need. So when they can come before their first year, even, we feel like we've given them a toolkit for success. But it's not unusual to hear teachers who've been teaching for quite some time who then come to the training and really feel like it revitalizes some of the things that they knew and perhaps
yes.
challenges them in new and different ways.
Well, it also kicked our butts, especially for the old timers like me, Linda Davis, and a few people that we've been around the block, and our brains don't even work as well as these 19 sums that can, do the what was the hand sign,
The Kerwin hand signs and all the, yeah,
and
lots
then
of
also the
tools.
the what was the echo where you have to sing, and then the other I forgot what it was called.
We either with 2 hands,
Eh,
signing differently or just
Yes,
reading
yes,
ahead of what's coming out of your mouth in kind
yes,
of a
yes,
canonic fashion. Yeah,
yes,
lots of exercises, little Kodály party tricks, but really they are
yes,
meant to build the kinds of skills that teachers need in the classroom when you're
yes,
teaching part work and this group needs help and the group on the other side of the room needs help as well and you can't split
exactly.
yourself in half. How can you support them both to be able to do some of those things is a it was a challenge to all of us when we began, I promise you.
No, it was easy. Especially these nights you're like, I can do it the first time. I just ran into your colleague whose teacher, Ben.
Uh-huh.
I was like, okay, you just did everything perfect the first time. You made it look so easy. I'm sitting there struggling, and you, oh, I got it. I'm like, but to our new teachers that are transitioning, I can't emphasize this enough. Do not wait to get this extra training, whether it's Kodály or ORF. You need all those extra approaches to help really shape your viewpoint. Fortunately, in Plano, under your direction, we already had an established curriculum. I mean, but just to have those building blocks are so crucial. So you walk in knowing concepts, and I tell students all the time, I don't teach songs for
Right.
songs purposes. I use songs to illustrate concepts.
Yes.
And that's why what I do is such as important as an academic subject and the
Yes.
rigor. And, so
Yes.
thank you. Thank you. I better transition that for we spend the whole podcast talking about this program. But talk about, if you could, how you transition from teaching to being such a dynamic administrator. So how did your journey?
Sure. Well, so a good portion of it was just simply being in the right place at the right moment.
Okay.
That
Sure.
sometimes either through luck or providence,
Yes.
depending on your worldview and maybe a little of both. I was in a position in Plano where the previous coordinator who had been responsible for elementary music was retiring.
Yes.
And she had set us up really well. The first Kodály inspired curriculums were written in the mid 80s in Plano
Mm,
ISD. So the foundation was firmly in place. And so, I was fortunate to throw my hat in the ring and to be selected to do that. The first year, I actually coordinated elementary music half a day and taught
mm,
kinder and first grade in the afternoons. And in some ways, that was manic because I felt like I didn't have the proper time and preparation for either of those
sure.
hats. But on the other hand, it helped me to wean a little bit from that daily interaction of 7 hours a day with the children, which I
Hmm.
love. I didn't leave the classroom because I was done with doing it or that I was fed up with it or that I thought I couldn't do it anymore. It was really an opportunity to have a broader impact across the district.
Yes.
So the first year it was just focused on elementary music. And the second year, I sort of went to my boss and said, I am living two lives and not doing either one of them justice. So let's pick a lane and I'll be happy with whichever one you
Yes.
choose for me. But I kind of need to be in one world or the other. And so he assigned me to oversee vocal music K through 12. So I took on all of our choral friends at that particular time and moved into administration for the full time. But I will say the first couple of years, missing the children and that daily interaction, even though I know today sometimes it's really difficult. They make it
Yes.
hard to love them sometimes. But, I just found I would sneak off on a Friday afternoon and go sit in a circle somewhere for just an hour and sing and play along with a group of kids. And that helped to boost my morale and to refocus, like supporting these teachers and what they are
Yes.
doing is why I'm in the other building away from the children.
Yes.
And so that was an important thing for me, going to concerts, being present when groups were competing at UIL and other things was a way to stay close to the pulse of the real work and not just become a paper pusher.
Yeah, and it's funny because you kind of touched on my next question about how you navigating with I still love teaching, I miss it, but I will tell you, working under you when you came to my classroom or any of the classrooms, what while you came as an administrator, you came from what I saw as another teacher, just as a learner. You still had that passion for teaching, that I can see and the kids felt. And what I knew as a guest, they knew was someone that loved music too. And that was impactful for me because when you walked in the room, it wasn't a gotcha, or it was, hey, another
Right.
colleague that's like music lover that's invested in still being connected with the classroom. That's another thing I really appreciate when I, had you saw you and interacted with you, you were still connected. So I think that's
Yeah, I
mhm,
think that's critical to all administrative work and leadership, but it's one of the blessings in curriculum and instruction work versus principalship.
that's true.
Because I was never assigned as the observer of record.
Okay.
So when I came to the classroom, I always tried to come as a support, as an
Yes.
encourager. How can I help? What do you need? Here's what I see. What if we tried this?
Yes.
What if I sent you to see so and so with their
Mhm.
kinders if the 5-year-olds are making you crazy? Those were the kinds of things that I felt like that was my in leading teachers to get their arms around our curriculum and content,
Yes.
to figure out their own voice in that context, right?
Yes.
And the right voice, the right model for their individual campus.
Yes.
Each classroom, each school has its own demographics and leadership styles and all the things. And I never felt as though there was one cookie cutter teacher model that was going to work in all of those places. But I also think that good teaching is good teaching. And so
Yes.
when the content is carefully sequenced and quality materials have been chosen and the teacher has good instructional practices, the rest of it more or less takes care of itself. And so if
Yes.
I could walk into a classroom and offer guidance or
Yes.
just affirmation, I mean,
Yes. Yes.
affirmation for in-service teachers is the most important thing of all. So, if I could just walk into the classroom for a few minutes and a thumbs up, you're doing a great job, thanks for
Mhm.
everything, then I felt like I had been successful that day. And not every classroom visit was always that warm and fuzzy, of
Sure,
course.
sure, of course. Yeah.
Sure. But I think that the hard conversations come easier if you have built that supportive, I'm here to help
Yes.
relationship. before you have to go in and have some heavier conversations.
No, that's great, and we definitely appreciate that and felt that. As specials teachers, for those of you who know, as specials teachers, music, art, PE, we're really on an island because there's no one else typically in the building.
Right.
That teaches our subject content area. We see the entire school of the 800 students only for 45 minutes. So in some ways, we're like grandparents, and there's always the rush to make sure we keep all of the classes, on the same engaged and also in the same place in the curriculum. So definitely seeing a leader that encourages us and that can give us wisdom, and also that allows us to go see this person, go do this
Mhm.
person. Did you consider that? Was so, so very helpful. So, thank you again. This is going to be like giving you flowers, because as I reflect and look back, there are so many teachers, have to navigate through that. And I definitely, I've had great leaders, and you're one of them, and you've done so many things to help force to that. So, you know, that's a great way to help leaders navigate, especially in Plano ISD, where it's a huge district, 42, 43 campuses, and,
Yep.
you know, so, speaking of Plano ISD, you had the pleasure of leading in the design team for this huge project. God bless you. I didn't know you went to school for architectural engineering,
I did
and
not.
design for the Robbie Lenore Robinson Fine Arts Center. And if you haven't seen that, folks, it's a beauty to behold. It's a $65 million project that, on top of your other responsibilities, you was navigating. And can you talk about, your experience, all the degrees you had to get you ready for that, and that whole, how did you even wrap your
Sure.
mind around that? So,
I would love to. So, what a passion project that turned out to be. Now that it's open and students are performing there on the regular, it really does make me smile from ear to ear when I think of students on that stage. First off, it was such an amazing experience. Just the fact that our community felt that a performance hall, a semi-professional level performance hall, was the sort of thing that our students were worthy of, and that they were willing to pay the price, because it was a bond project. So it was a choice project for the community. They had to vote thumbs up,
yes.
and they did so in huge numbers for that particular bond. And so we felt a huge responsibility, but also tons of affirmation from the community that this was something they really wanted. They wanted to see a place like this for our students. I had been on design teams
Okay.
for schools,
Sure.
obviously, over the years, and the occasional auditorium reno.
Hmm.
I had never built one from the ground up.
Okay.
But that's why you select carefully. So we had, the whole process was, I just felt the whole village around us, that the district construction department, the people who handle bids and
Yes.
and contracts and all of that sort of stuff, held our hand through the whole selection process in terms of who the design team was going to be and all of the different support. Because in a project like this, it's not just an architectural firm.
Hmm.
It's an
Yes.
theatrical specialists for all of
Hmm.
the theater rigging and equipment and all
Yes.
kinds of things. And so there were sometimes 40 people in a room for a discussion about some portion of the design. And then huge props to the coordinators who were part of my team in the district.
Yes.
At the time, it was Laura Grunler, who was our wonderful visual arts coordinator.
Yes.
Greg Arp was our theater arts
Yes.
coordinator. Jeremy Condrat was our instrumental music coordinator. Susan Hayes was our dance coordinator. And so the five of us, both in the meetings with the larger team and in our own group meetings, just worked really hard to make sure that all of the spaces had the maximum functionality for what we knew student performances and student competitions in those spaces would need. And everybody brought their expertise because one act play doesn't look like middle school band.
Yes,
And all of
exactly.
this, right, exactly. So the needs were different amongst those groups quite often, that we had enough space for all of the competitions and all of the arts, all of the disciplines to be present in the space. So most performing arts facilities around the state and
Mhm.
elsewhere are really about performing arts. And the visual art component often feels kind of like an afterthought.
Yeah,
They find a couple of blank walls and hang some
exactly.
student
Yeah,
art,
yeah,
right? And we saw that in a lot of the places that we visited, that we just felt like the visual art was an afterthought. We have an amazing visual arts program. Our students are doing really high level
yes.
work,
They are.
and
Yes, they are.
they deserved a centerpiece of a stage to perform on the same way that our musicians and our thespians and our dancers did. So putting that studio, that gallery right there in the middle of the lobby, the central lobby area, was really important to us. And then we just had to lean into the experts. I mean, the things I know about acoustics, I could fit on my pinky.
Mhm.
Had to keep looking at the acousticians and say, "Is this gonna sound great? Because
Yeah.
I don't want it if it doesn't sound great," right?
Yes,
And,
yes.
and so functionality and the acoustics in each of the spaces were kind of our top priorities. And when we had to make tough decisions, and in every project you do, because the money isn't endless,
Mhm.
even though $65 million sounds like a
Sounds like
lot
a
of
lot of money.
money.
It sure
When
does.
you start building a building like this, it's
Mm.
not as much money as it sounds like.
Yeah,
So you always have to make some difficult choices, and we always kinda went back to, is this gonna affect the acoustics? Is it gonna affect the functionality? We're gonna make those the priorities. And
and of
so
course. Mhm.
it's not necessarily the most extravagant visual space. It's not necessarily the most beautiful building
Mm.
that you've ever been in, but I think that the spaces hold up both acoustically and in terms of their functionality for lots of different events and performances and all the things that it's being used for now. And so I think that everybody I talk to says that the building, the design itself is really holding up the way we hoped that it would, and that's a real pleasure for me to hear.
Yes, and, just hearing kids perform and getting that experience where they can go not to the Meyerson, which is great, or somewhere they can go right in their own city and say, "This is where we perform." Schools are nice, gymnasiums are nice, but it's a whole 'nother thing, takes a
Right?
whole 'nother level when kids, they dress up, they walk in the environment, wow, this is,
Mhm.
so
Yeah, absolutely.
wow. Well, transitioning
Okay,
from that big project to, we talked earlier about, curriculum initiatives. What are some of the biggest lessons you've learned from managing, those district level projects? I know you touched on a
sure.
little bit before, but a lot of districts, are faced where there's a gap. They might have a scope. What what resource do I pick in the meantime? Where is the
Right.
district going? So can you talk about some lessons? I'm
Sure.
sure there's leaders that are in that transition now as well.
Sure, absolutely. Well, so the first thing I always say to colleagues in the arts who are hesitant to put too much detail into their curriculum documents is to say, well, walk across the hall and talk to the English coordinator or talk to the mathematics
Yes.
coordinator. They are not willing to say, well, as long as first graders learn to computate a few single digit numbers over the course of first grade, then we'll consider that you've done your job. There's much more detail in the
Yes.
expectation. in each grade level in many of the other content areas. So why would we hesitate in putting in place high expectations in arts contexts as well?
Yes.
Because it is a sequential set of skills
Hmm.
and knowledge that has to be built over time and through repetition. So, that was sort of the first place. And as I said before, when I came to Plano, there was already quite an extensive elementary music curriculum and
Right.
very much Kodály inspired. So the edits that we made to it over time was updating song material, moving certain concepts around from grade level to grade level, either because the state standards had adjusted the scope and
Yes.
sequence, or because our own experience was telling us that this concept belongs in a different place along the continuum. And then I always took the position that my experienced teachers who have taken the training, who've been in the classroom, who've worked with these documents for a certain amount of time, have the knowledge base. They know their own students, they know their own repertoire. They can wander on the edges of some of this, add their own song material, adjust within a grade level the sequence of events. But the younger teachers, those first year teachers, again, haven't had a lot of experience. Most of them spent 6 or 7 weeks with
Yeah.
elementary children in their student teaching environment.
Mhm.
And then suddenly they're responsible for 6 grade levels, 45 minutes a week, all year long. That's a lot of content that they really didn't get a lot of direction about.
Yes.
So we wrote curriculum with those novice teachers in mind, saying, here's not just the scope and sequence, but if you don't know any song material,
Yes.
here's some we can recommend for you, and they're all in the books on your shelf, right?
Yes.
So that they didn't spend all of the beginning years just searching for songs every week.
Mm.
They had some recommendations, and they could choose from those and be successful, and to provide some structure to the learning of individual concepts. And then that sort of grew over time into the discussions of then this big gap between elementary school, which tended to sort of live in its own little environment, and
Yes.
then the secondary, middle, high school content. And at least in Plano, and I think it's true in lots and lots of other places, that the middle high school sequence and the connection between those programs and those directors was really tight,
Yeah.
because now it becomes an elective course. We want them to be enjoying themselves and being successful and desiring to continue with those programs. So those high school directors want to be fairly involved at the middle school level so that
Yes.
those kids will know them and will want to go on to the next level of performance and challenge. But nobody was coming down to the elementary school with
Mhm.
similar kinds of desires.
Yes.
And so we started looking at what can we do in terms of building a K-12 curriculum scope and sequence that would bridge that gap. And it took us a good almost 2 years to write the documents, because
Okay.
there's a lot of chewing on all of the details. But essentially what we did was we agreed right off the bat, everybody from kindergarten through 12th grade, those teachers understand the techniques necessary for the music making in their
Yes.
ensemble or in their environment, right? We don't necessarily need a technical guide, which is really what our secondary curriculum primarily had been, was, 6th graders will learn these scales and
Sure.
7th graders will
Yeah.
play these scales. And by
Exactly.
ninth grade, we know all the things, right? So we put that aside and said, yes, technique is necessary, and you teach the technique that is required for the concepts and the repertoire that is under study. We don't need a handbook for that. What we do need is a clear scope and sequence to be sure that all of the musical concepts that students need over the course of their public school career are are covered with intention.
Yes.
So part of it was just, a lot of it was clarifying what did the elementary curriculum teach? How did it teach it? What was the terminology? What was the vocabulary? What were the systems that were in place when students left fifth grade? And then saying to the middle school teachers, this is what they know, and this
Hmm.
is how they know it.
Yes.
This may not be your preferred language for that, but it doesn't mean that they don't know things.
Yes. Yes.
They have knowledge. So knowing the incoming sixth grade language, how do you transition them to metric counting, for example, or
Mhm.
note names or
Yes.
fingerings, right? And so giving them some techniques for making those connections, and then being very specific about, okay, we've gotten up to, I'm going to just pick a couple of concepts, but so we've read up through 6-8. So we've done
Hmm.
2-4 and 4-4 and 3-4 and 6-8. We haven't done 9-8. We haven't done 12-8. We haven't done mixed meter. We haven't done asymmetric fives and sevens.
Yes.
You know,
Yes. Yes.
so there are lots of, and we probably haven't gone much past 16th note combinations, right?
Mhm.
So as you transition your students into more advanced literature, there's still some metric and rhythmic concepts that have to be taught. And you can't just drop a piece of 7-8 music down in front of eighth graders and expect that that's going to go well without some thoughtful preparation and intentional instruction. So sort of laying out a sequence of those kinds of concepts in rhythm, in meter, in melody, in scales and tonal centers, in form and style, technique, articulation, all those kinds of things, all the way up to the 12th grade was really what that project was about. It didn't specify. We made some suggestions, again, about repertoire, just if you need a piece to make this introduction,
Sure.
then
Sure.
here are some suggestions. But again, giving those secondary teachers a little bit wider berth in terms of selecting repertoire because they have to play within the UIL guidelines and a
Yes.
whole other set of stuff
Yeah. Yeah.
at and of course the performance expectations at those levels are pretty intense. So they're trying to balance the teaching of concepts and skills and being ready for a fairly in-depth performance every 6 to 9 weeks.
Yes, yes. Well, I can definitely attest that, coming from another state, New York, and, where we kind of focus on third grade Suzuki and band in fourth grade as a outside teacher to Texas, I'm like, they're not going to perform that well starting at sixth grade. And I was sorely mistaken because the preparation with melodic concepts, and especially rhythmic concepts, they already had that foundation, and how fast they were able to learn because they had that foundation there was so remarkable.
Right. Right.
And, one of the things that I hold dearly is even with rhythmic concepts, we give each rhythm a language,
Right.
it's not just something you hear or feel. So I definitely attest to, as a teacher from different experiences, the importance of that, and the importance of folk songs. It is very clear if you've met Kathy, she is a folk song enthusiast, lover. She's passionate about it. Can you talk about, that and its impact and how you see, it impacting students?
Sure. Well, I'm a kid of the late 60s, early 70s.
Yes.
So did kind of grow up on the folk revival of that period. Pete Seeger and Woody Guthrie and Peter, Paul and Mary and all of those
Yes.
people were kind of my pop singers of the day. So I think that helped.
Yes.
But I think also that music of any kind
Mhm.
it comes from a specific place and a specific group of people. And sometimes that's a geographic place,
Yes.
sometimes it's an ethnic place, sometimes it's a political place, sometimes it's just a linguistic place. But the thing about folk songs that I think it was the reason Kodály leaned into them as well was that the earliest songs were shared in an oral tradition. People
Yes.
sang them to one another.
Mhm.
And as a consequence, they had to be fairly easy. They had to be easy to sing and easy to remember.
Yes.
And if they were too complicated or required too many additional supports like instruments and all that sort of stuff to be successful, they weren't passed down through the generations. And I think that's one of the things that the 20th century and the 21st century parent and child really struggle with, because previous generations, previous centuries, without mass media, that's
Yes.
how communities came together. It's how families entertained themselves. And so those songs and that activity of communal singing and familial singing was just a natural part of life.
Yes. Yes.
It has waned into the background for lots of people, which makes it more difficult. But
Yes.
most of the pop music of the day or commercial music of the day is really too complicated for little children. So we have to go back to the nursery rhymes and the children's songs that have been passed down for generations in whatever culture the children are from. While I always say in my classes, I am about as Scotch, Irish, Anglo as they come. My DNA is like 70% from
Sure.
that part of
Sure.
the world. But I understand that not everybody's coming from that same place. There are all kinds of wonderful communities of song and music from all ethnicities in every corner of the world. I think that Kodály believed in looking at the faces in the classroom
Yes.
and
Yes. Yes.
attempting to bring um, s- a, a balance of traditional material from whatever that community is into the classroom in whatever way, while still sort of balancing, in my opinion, I think we're going to talk about it a little later, the need to help many of our students acquire English as
Yes.
a communicative language.
Hmm.
So it's finding that balance, but I think folk songs that have been passed down for 300 years in the oral tradition are a pretty great way to start.
Yes, and I tell my students I'm a gatekeeper, as a
Yes,
teacher because, I'm amazed how many students don't know those basic songs, and
their
it
parents
troubles
don't
me.
know them.
They don't know, yeah, and but I will also say, definitely as a teacher and it's important to also find songs, like you said, that reach the other communities. For instance, my wife is from Panama, and her
Mhm.
grandmother came up to take care of our two kids
Fantastic.
when they were born, and she didn't speak any English. And every night I heard her singing this song called "Los Pollitos Dicen" about a little chicken who's cold and
Uh-huh.
hungry. And every single time I go into a campus and I sing that song, you'd be surprised how oh my goodness, my grandmother's saying the same. It makes
Yes.
that connection. Like, wow, how do you know that? I'm like, well, I experienced that, and also finding other songs of
Yep.
different cultures, it makes that connection. So, that's a nice segue for talking, about, learners and, you've done a lot of incredible work integrating language support for, limited English proficient students in the classroom. Can you share how music can serve a bridge? I kind of talked about that for language learning, but your
Sure.
experience as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, always, especially with the Kodály philosophy. Kodály was a linguist. It was one of his many skills, and he recognized right off that music has a language
Yes.
that communicates certain things in the same way that we have words in lots of different languages. And so there are lots of parallels between learning a language and learning music. Children learn to babble before they really learn to communicate. And then once they start communicating, typically it's with one or two words, and then they learn to read sort of sight words. So
Mhm.
they learn to some familiar
Yes.
groupings of letters that they know means cat or
Mhm.
dog or mother or
Mhm.
whatever,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes.
And it takes time for them to be able to put all of the context of language together. Music is really no different. You have to be able to feel a pulse before you can subdivide it and call it
Mhm.
quarter notes and eighth notes and do all of those things. Children can usually communicate verbally
Yes.
much more proficiently than they can in reading and writing. And the same is also true in music. They will be able to perform things that they
Yes.
were taught by rote much earlier and with greater proficiency than they can read those things. So it's finding a balance there. I think it's also um, I think everybody has some song or rhyme that they learned in childhood that they still lean into. When I'm thinking about my calendar, I still find myself saying 30 days has September, April, June, and November. All the rest
Yes.
are 31 except
Mhm.
for, you know, and
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
I don't know the day I learned that little rhyme. But at 65, it still
Mhm. Yes.
helps me, know what I'm doing. So finding those kinds of things that give them useful functional language, whether it's just rhythmic speech or whether it's singing your ABCs to Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, that those are the kinds of ways that we help support second language emerging English speakers using folk song, again, because the language is typically pretty straightforward and
Yes.
fairly simplistic. So
Mhm.
it's also sort of fundamental language.
Yes.
So it gives them some things that they can speak, and I always encouraged teachers to use visuals. If we're
Yes.
singing about the ducks, then the ducks are
Mhm.
there, or the stars
Yes.
or whatever. Early in my career, I was a real snob about writing out all of the lyrics for
Okay.
songs, and writing them out on the board or having song sheets. But the more I got into second language supports, the more I realized, that's actually a pretty helpful thing to do as long as we don't do it all the time for everything.
Yes.
But that there are times when actually that's really helpful, not only for our emerging English language students whose primary language is something other than English, but
Yes.
even just in some communities or in some households where well-structured English isn't the way people speak to one another,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
to help them learn to build sentences and to see how their own language is structured is all really helpful. So I think it dovetails nicely. I don't think that one thing only serves the other purpose. I think they can support one another if we're just thoughtful about how we do that.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I will also add to that, you know, with all of these experiences in teaching, just also the responsibility that parents have to make sure they're singing to their kids,
Absolutely.
passing that along because, as a music teacher, we have a very important responsibility to make sure everyone finds their singing voice and that
Yes.
everyone can have the joy of music. I just purchased this device to help my kindergarten students hear their voice because some of them didn't have that
Right.
experience and they can't even find their singing voice and they see that they're, hey, why does Susie sound different than my voice? Speaking of, all the many things that you've done of your career, the Plano Kodály teacher training program has had such an impact across not just the state of Texas, across the country, across the world, because there's other programs, that are like your program or other programs. Can you talk about, that experience, what inspired you to, start it? How did you get the colleagues from Hungary to come? That
Sure.
the whole journey.
Well, I can't even wrap my head around the fact that last summer was our 25th
Wow.
summer, because it seems like just yesterday. But so there is a national organization called the Organization of American Kodály Educators. And for some, well, going on 30 years now, I guess, they have had a set of guidelines for Kodály-inspired teacher training that includes pedagogy, personal musicianship, materials, folk music research, conducting, and an ensemble, typically a choir experience of some kind.
Yes.
So those 5 components, a total of a minimum of 225 hours over however many days or summers, weeks, whatever, that the course runs. That's the minimum amount. And each of those 5 content areas has a specific minimum requirement. And again, just reflecting on young teachers coming into Plano and looking at this curriculum and not really having a context for it, because there's a lot there. It's a big,
Yes.
when it was a notebook, it was this thing.
Yes.
It is no longer a notebook,
Yes.
but it was back in those days. And so it was kind of overwhelming, and you sort of
Mhm.
needed a philosophical and a practical framework for those things. So we started really small. It was really just a level 1 group of local Plano teachers who had just been hired or just finished their first year, and trying to give them the training that we had experienced that got
Mhm.
us going, to sharpen their own musicianship, to give them context for the pedagogy. And we did that internally for 3 or 4 years. And then the universities started reaching out, and we spent a period of time at UNT up in Denton.
Okay.
And then moved to SMU in 2010, I
Okay.
want to say, something along those lines. And those moves were really just practical, logistical, in terms of having space on the campus. UNT is a very large school of music, but it's also a really busy place in the summer.
Yes.
Lots
My
of
daughter's a student. Yeah.
lots of summer camps of all kinds for collegiate and professional level students, as well as high school students and such. And so, SMU being a slightly smaller program had a little more flexibility in terms of time and space for us. So that was really just a practical decision. And until COVID, unfortunately, COVID has sort of changed the makeup of our faculty a bit. But up until that time, we brought at least one Hungarian to participate as typically as our choral conductor and our most challenging musicianship and conducting teacher, because she was a master teacher with 40 plus years of experience, with the she studied with the second generation
Wow.
of Kodály students. So Kodály had a group of students he taught directly, and then she learned from that cohort. So she really kept us tied closely to his vision, while letting us, use our own repertoire and all those things. And I'm still very much in touch with her. I just saw her this summer in
Yes.
Hungary, and we had a
Let's
wonderful.
see. Yes.
Yeah, she's fantastic. And but she's 75 now and really, really retired,
Yeah.
and the cross the pond travel is challenging,
Yes.
physically and
Yes.
all of that. So I was so glad to be able to be there this last summer and spend some quality time with her. And, we reminisced and we laughed and we sang and did all the things
Mhm.
together.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
absolutely.
she's sharp as a whip, and she will challenge your music brain.
Yes, absolutely, to this moment. She
Yes.
hasn't lost a bit of that. Yeah.
Well, definitely, that program is definitely shaped and helped encourage so many, teachers, not only in Plano, across, the state of Texas and other states. And,
Mhm.
it's revered. Out of all the things I think I've accomplished, college degrees, it's up there with the three levels because it
Mm.
really challenges you and it empowers you, to think about music and so many different facets. And it also reminds you that our kids can do so much if we have the right training, we shape um, I
Yep.
was just talking, again with the social work, and he was talking about how since 2012, the challenge with, devices and, how that more anxiety and more social emotional challenges and, just thinking about, seeing so many students accomplish so much with the right tools and how music can be so impactful. I mean, I've had the pleasure, of when I was in New York and even in Texas of working with some students that have some special needs and,
Mhm.
you know, just seeing, for some of them, music was their jam. And I've seen some
Mhm.
incredible things. They might struggle socially and but music,
Absolutely.
just such great memories and, so thankful for this program. And, if you are a teacher, again, please, look for it next summer. It will be challenging, but it will be impactful. And all my colleagues, they say, it's a challenge, but it's definitely worth it. And it's a badge of, like with a
Mhm.
degree. If you get
Yeah.
through it, you can say I've learned that discipline, and it opens the doors. And I will say, just even teaching, instrumental or choir or piano
Mhm.
lessons, I use so many things to help,
Absolutely.
so, such a great program.
My certificate hangs right up here next to my 2 degrees. I
Yes.
agree with you completely. The summer program at SMU will run, I'm doing this off the top of my head, June 29th through
Okay.
July 15th or 16th, and you can keep an eye on the SMU Summer Music Ed Workshop page for registration probably in February. And, maybe a shameless plug that I'm doing a
Please, please. Yes.
musicality at all levels lecture for the University of North Texas,
I think November 6th, I believe.
November 6th at
Yes,
5
yes.
o'clock, and they are going to live stream it.
Okay.
So if anybody's listening and can't get to UNT by 5 o'clock on a Thursday.
Mm. I'll get there early because the traffic and construction is a whole other production.
It
Yes.
is, absolutely, but I also know that that's a big lift for a lot of
Yes.
in-service teachers, which is why we're going to live stream it. So,
Yes.
I have a link that I can send out if
Okay.
anybody wants to private message me. I'll be happy to share that information if you're interested.
Now we've kinda talked so much about, your career. We need to get to the retirement because there are some people that are dreaming about it. Some people are on the cusp. Can you share us about what retirement's like and, your experiences there,
Yeah.
transitioning out?
So I'm just a little past 3 years since
Okay.
my retirement date, and I'm loving it. I was pretty sure that I would, but it's exceeded all my expectations. I am not just resting in my recliner because that's not who I am, but my husband and I are doing a lot of traveling, seeing lots of places that we either hadn't seen or hadn't spent a lot of time in. Between his military service and my dad working for an oil company that took us a lot of places, we have friends and family in all corners of the US, so we've been trying to make that a priority as
Sure.
well. But I'm still heavily involved in the summer program, doing the occasional workshop, not nearly as many as I have done in the past, but keeping my hand in on
Sure.
occasion. And I've been doing a lot of folk song research in the last few years, just kind of looking at songs that have gotten the songs of with questionable pasts kind of
Yes.
on that list.
Yes.
And just trying to not not decide, thumbs up, thumbs down about those
Mhm.
songs, but just to dig into the historical facts.
Yes.
and to provide as much of that as I can within the, confines of living a life. But, just trying to help teachers because it does take some time and you do have to kind of know where to look and how to dig and have the time to stick with it to kind
Yes.
of get to the history. And I know what teachers' lives are like. And so there isn't a lot of that time. So trying to provide some of that. So some of it is on my website, and I've been doing a regular column for the Kodály Educators of Texas newsletter. So each quarter when their newsletter comes out, there's a column about another folk song that mostly the members have requested. They send in submissions and ask for information about particular songs that they have questions about, and I try to dig and see what I can find. So that keeps me pretty busy.
And can you share your website for our listeners?
Sure, it's easy. It's KuddesMusic.com.
Okay. And can you spell your last name? Because I know that's typical like Curtin. See, no, it's K.
Yeah, it's Kuddes.
Yes.
So I don't know
Yes.
if they can see my name on the screen, but that's how
They
the it
Again, in the show notes, I'm going to also share your information,
perfect.
but definitely it's a
Yeah,
great resource.
yeah.
I've thoroughly enjoyed speaking with you today, as always, and I have to cut this short, but I'd love to have you come back on and talk about, retiring and also navigating through TEA.
I
You've
would love
been
that.
such a joy to work with, to know, to view the world through. I told my wife, the one thing I wish that trip to Hungary that got canceled years ago
Oh,
that I was,
yeah.
you know, but it's just inspiring to see, the impact you've had. And I know that our listeners, whether parents, whether students, whether educators, whether future leaders, will be inspired by the things you've shared today. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was a pleasure to see you.
Thank you as well.
And thanks for joining us today. Please like, subscribe, and share this episode with a colleague. Keep learning, keep growing, and never stop believing in your impact because you truly make a difference.